Pentagon says 2,300 National Guard troops to stay at Capitol through May 23rd as post-riot review calls for increased security. And the image here is the security fence topped with razor wire, and you see these soldiers holding war weapons, dressed for war. They're walking around in the capital of the United States, Washington D.C., and this is to protect the Capitol building from protesters. Protesters who tried to and partially stormed the Capitol building. These protesters were unarmed. They did fight with the police outside the Capitol building. The police fought back. I think the use of force was more or less proportional. But when they got inside the building, at least one protester was just plain shot dead. She was unarmed. She was climbing through a window, and an armed security guard shot her dead. So that's what was happening in the US. That's how the US deals with protesters. They stop them dead in their tracks. And then in the aftermath, they do this. They have these security barriers. They have soldiers, not police, not riot police, not soldiers who are acting in the capacity of riot troops, soldiers carrying war weapons. This is the United States, and I'm pointing this out because I think it's important for people around the world to understand what is happening in the United States, in Washington, D.C., the capital of America, and then to listen to the United States lecture countries all around the globe about how they deal with protesters. We remember the Western media and fake human rights groups funded by the US government complaining about Thailand creating barriers to stop violent protesters from storming sensitive buildings in the capital, Bangkok. And now we have violent protesters in Myanmar clashing with police and soldiers all over the country. And we see the violence taking place. And we could only imagine if the protests in Washington, D.C., before the inauguration of President Joe Biden, if that violence was at that level as we see in Myanmar or even here in the streets in Bangkok, how many more protesters would have been killed by security forces that day? If they tried to attack the Capitol building now with the security barrier, if they tried to breach that barrier, what do you think these soldiers would do? The only thing that they have are war weapons. What do you think they would do to stop the protesters? How many people would die? So I want to point out this hypocrisy. The next time the US tries to dictate to Thailand about how to deal with protesters here, just remind them how they're dealing with protesters there in the US, and that the Thai police have been much more patient, many times more professional than the police who were present during the protests in Washington. Just one day, 4 protesters died, and at least one of them we know for a fact was shot dead by security that day. Haven't had one single protester killed in over a year of protests here in Thailand, even though the protesters have been trying really hard to get someone killed, and it hasn't happened yet. So just keep all of this in mind. The US isn't going to stop meddling just because we are pointing this out, but it's important for people to understand this so that when the pressure increases, people can put pressure back on them. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share it. Think about subscribing. It's free to do, and it helps the channel grow. Please check out my channel on Odyssey, where I back up all of my videos in case YouTube deletes my channel. Look in the video description for ways you can help support my work, like by becoming a Patreon member. This allows me to continue doing this work. And as always, thank you for watching.